Hello everyone, my name is Dave and I am making this video to show my solve for the Forrest Fenn treasure. I am a new seeker of the Forrest Fenn treasure. I only found out about the treasure in December 2018, right around Christmas time. I happened upon a video. Some people they had both come up with solves and they were looking in Yellowstone to see if they could find the treasure. So that was how I was introduced to to Forrest Fenn and the treasure hunt. So as you can see on my screen, this is Cody, Wyoming. I Before I had the book, and only just from the like I say, the first video that I ever saw that kind of introduced me to it, I randomly chose Cody, because I took Yellowstone as a starting for where warm waters halt. Taking the canyon down, I took it to the east instead of the west, into West Yellowstone. I felt like, the first little research that I did, it seemed like everybody was stuck in Yellowstone or West Yellowstone, and I thought, I wonder if there would be any reason for it to go to the east. And of course, there's a lot of connection to Cody, with Forrest and Cody, that I only learned after I started looking in this area. So I put together a solve over the last few months, and in the end of March, I went and tested it, went boots on the ground. My wife and I drove to Cody. It's about a 7-hour drive from my home. So we went up there for a quick weekend just to take a look. I was very anxious to see if I was correct, and I was not. Spoiler alert, I did not find it. I don't believe that it's in Cody for a few reasons. But I thought that the information I put together, to me, was very compelling. I'm sure it was the confirmation bias, and but I felt like I really did feel like the area fit the narrative of both the Thrill of the Chase book. I thought the poem could be fit easily to this area. Being a new searcher, of course, I have the advantage of all these years of interviews and additional information, things that have been eliminated by interviews with Forrest. So it's helpful in that way to start a solve. And I did want to show. I mean, I could easily just post on a blog somewhere, hey, I went to Cody and it wasn't there. I think it's helpful to show the information I put together, and I even have a couple little video clips. They're not the greatest. I used a kind of a knockoff GoPro that's supposed to be 4K, and it was horrible. So the actual boots on the ground location I shot with this crappy little video recorder that did not do very well. But I did want to include it just as proof that I was there. And then the next day before we left, I shot a couple clips with my actual GoPro from another observation point, and I wanted to include those with this. But I did want to show how a lot of things that have been said, and a lot of things in just the entire narrative, how it can work here. And I did overlook one very important thing, and going boots on the ground, definitely eliminated the area for me. That's something that I couldn't know without going boots on the ground, and I will describe that when I get to that point. But you wouldn't eliminate Cody just from the book and the poem. It's not. You could eliminate it. There's some things that Forrest has said when he's narrowed it down with different hints that eliminate it. But with the information I put together, I just had to go look. And like I say, it's just a 7-hour drive. We could drive up there, look, stay the night, look around a little bit more, go to the museum, and then be back the next afternoon. So it was a fun, quick weekend. Cody's a neat place. I've never been there, and I don't want to ramble on. So let me go through this. I want to show you this, and hopefully it, maybe it'll give some new ideas. Maybe it'll, and I definitely want to help people eliminate this. I'm sure there will be people curious to go themselves. I know that when you're excited about this, any little thing might actually entice you more than push you away. But let me show you what I came up with. Now I'm going to actually start with the first stanza for just a minute. So going in, when he says, "As I've gone alone in there with my treasure bold," and this comes into play a little bit more here in a while. But I wanted to say this is the Riverside Cemetery in Cody. The way I interpreted, "As I have gone alone in there and with my treasures bold," it made me think of, and as you go through the poem a bunch of times, memorize it, and then you keep going back to the book, The Thrill, the Chase, something that stood out to me was that the chapter where he mentions, as a boy when he's getting in trouble and with his dad. Now, he would sometimes sneak out of the house at night if it wasn't too cold, and he would go over to the cemetery, which is a block away from their home. And I think he shared that because there's several themes throughout The Thrill of the Chase. One of them is death. One of them is, there's cemeteries, there's headstones, there's references, stories even that he's told over the years. There's just a lot of things about death. Originally, the poem was about his own death. It was meant to be a map to where he was going to be when his life was ending. He had a place in mind, and so it was kind of a "come find me. Here's where my body will be with this treasure." So I compared. I thought that it kind of fit the narrative of that story. This young boy going in to a cemetery. And while he has said that it is not buried in a cemetery, I'm not saying that it is either, but this cemetery will play a role in my solve. So I wanted to start, because it's the first stanza, I wanted to show this first thing, and I will come back to this. But let's go to where I start the clues. I'm going to line this up. This is the Google Earth Pro app, and I don't always like, as you zoom in, a lot of times it kind of pans up or down or whatever it is. So this is the Shoshone River, and the Shoshone River runs through or past the city of Cody. You can see it winds its way through. This area right here is called Coulter's Hell. In fact, somebody has posted a picture here. You can see that. So this area, Coulter's Hell, is, you can see how it's cut a canyon, so this fits into the poem. But this area has geothermal activity where the thermal waters come up through the ground, and they actually connect with the river and flow down. Matter of fact, this little what do they call it, a hot pot, or this is Damaris Hot Springs. This is a pool, and years past this was a tourist attraction. Locals and visitors could go sit in this hot spring, and now it's owned privately, so it's no longer accessible. My understanding is there used to be a bridge across the river here. Anyway, this is my interpretation of where warm waters halt. Is these thermal springs come up through the ground, they flow into the river, so hot water mixed with cold water creates warm water, but it halts at the surface and it goes in the canyon down. So it's kind of an automatic. You come up through the ground, you connect with the river, and you take it in the canyon down. So that could be interpreted as either one clue or two. So and I'm sorry, I apologize if this is shaky. This is my first attempt at a video. Um, and I'm using software that does a screen capture so that I can just show you everything that I did. So again, here's our area. Where warm waters halt, we take it in the canyon down. The next clue or step in the path leading us to the treasure is not far, but too far to walk. And so to determine that, we have to understand where is the home of Brown. The home of Brown, or put in below the home of Brown, would be the next clue. And so we have to continue too far to walk until we get to the home of Brown. So when I was doing my research, I got that far and I was taking the river down. I had to figure out, well, where is a home of Brown along the river? It can't go on forever, because I think it's well, to many people it's understood, and I've never read Too Far to Walk, but I understand that he describes something that's only a few miles in length would be sort of fits the narrative of his description. So as I was doing my research, I was looking at all the property owners. So I pulled up the county assessor website, and I was looking to see if any parcel of land through here is owned by a Brown, or if there was anything that fit that would help me to understand or to know this is where the home of Brown is. Well, I'm going to go back to now. So long story short, I did not find any property owners along the river that are owned by a Brown. There's also nothing that I could find that is owned by Forrest Fenn. A lot of private property around here, but going back to the cemetery, when you pull up the city map, so this is, let me go into, here's the city map, here's the cemetery, and if you see this here, so this property shows that it is called the Brown subdivision, and this is just right at the edge of that cemetery. So this is the Shoshone River coming through here. This is Sulphur Creek, and here's the Brown subdivision. So going back to Google Earth, let me add this little, so this would be kind of the property lines for the Brown addition or the Brown subdivision. So if we add our line, now we are looking at begin at where warm waters halt. From the photo you can see that that's a canyon. It's cut a real deep canyon. That's over 100 feet in most places, this canyon. Where warm waters halt, you take it in the canyon down. Not far, but too far to walk. This distance is about 3 miles to this point. Here's our home of Brown. Let me zoom in here. And using the nautical term for put in, I figured that meant to put in to the water or the river, which I think later in the poem where he says your efforts will be worth the cold. Also, I mean, there's so many things about, to me, that say you gotta venture into the water. So from here it's no place for the meek, the end is ever drawing nigh, there'll be no paddle up your creek, just heavy loads and water high. So at this point, and I realize I'm kind of just jumbling everything together now, but I've come down the river, I'm putting in below the home of Brown. It's no place for the meek, you know, getting in a river, but there's also no paddle up your creek, so you're not gonna now divert to this waterway, so you're continuing on, but the end is ever drawing nigh. Now the more I looked at this, and this is, I apologize if this is super corny, but if you can imagine, this is a horse, A blaze on a horse. I know. I apologize. That's silly. But this also reminded me of the Captain Kidd reference. He gives the poem in the book, and then he says, there's other subtle hints throughout the book, and then immediately he tells this story. The other night I dreamt I was Captain Kidd, and I was on this island measuring the treasure, whatever it was. And I thought, God, that just everything is coming together right here. And so this was my interpretation of the blaze. Now, uh, let me stop here and just say, you know, boots on the ground let me know that this is not it, because the safest place to cross is right here. And while it's not super deep, the river rocks are 10 to 18 inches around, and they're all covered in moss, and the river does flow hard enough that it could really knock you down. I went, like I say, March 23rd, I think, was the weekend, and it's early spring. It's not even the heavy runoff yet, but that was a very difficult crossing. That was difficult. I went facing upstream, walking sideways so that I could lean into the force of the water coming down. And I barely made it. My wife started off with me, and then we got halfway out and came back, and then I went it alone. I just said, I can't come all the way up here and not at least try. So I went over, looked around. I went around every one of these trees. And there's sagebrush, there's different types of pines and that out here. Let me cover a couple things. So going back to my safety uh, admonition here, if I can, this is not it. So don't go there. And I'm telling you, I know there's people that'll still. This may be compelling, and you're going to want to go. I get that. I'm just telling you, I wouldn't do it. I don't think that's safe. I don't think an 80-year-old man would do it, especially twice. Um, no kid could do it. Um, I searched it. I didn't find it. Oh, one other thing. If you look at the elevation, when my cursor is there, see that 4873. So that was my first thing. I knew that this was below the 5,000 foot mark. I ignored that because I know a lot of people ignore things that have been said, and they still go and try to, you know, check out their solve. So I went anyway. So there's one. Cody, Wyoming, up here at the cemetery, you can see 5,000 feet. It's a almost 200-foot drop down to that island. So a couple of the things. Here's some some bias that I added. Um, if you say if you think consider the 200-foot searcher, okay, a searcher could go to Cody, Wyoming, search anywhere that they had in mind, but maybe while they're in town, they go whitewater rafting, which is a very popular thing. If the treasure is hidden here in the middle of the island, the rafting comes past on this side because this side has rocks exposed a lot of the time. You could go by there. There's 160. You're within, and depending on where it's at on the island, you're 200 feet. A 500-foot person. So this is the Paul Stock Trail. Okay. This is a little observation point, and you can see the trail ends here. But people might take the trail all the way down here and sit at this thing. There's a little bench, and you can see that's 500 feet. So that fits the narrative that he has stated over time. Another one is he said that he went, what was it, made 4 trips, so one in and back, another one in and back. This is the Paul Stock Trail. If you park in this parking lot, and walk it in. Here's the trail. So there's the pathway. Now this particular path is almost 5,000 feet. So yeah, it's closer to a mile each way. You could cut across here, which is also doable. It's wider than this part, but this was more like 3/4 of a mile. So that would fit. That would be a 3 mile, back and forth. Another alternative, which was less likely, was this one. This was, I think, a little over 2,000 feet each way. And if you see this, this is our museum. This is, Forrest's lifelong connection to the city of Cody is the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. This is his umbilical connection to the city, if this were the place that it was hidden. He said from, every year that they went to Yellowstone, it was mandatory to stop and go to the museum. And I can't believe my phone is... Sorry about that. Here's the parking lot behind the museum, and he could have done that. That's 2,000 feet each way. The problem with that is people know Forrest, and if they saw him, especially making a couple trips across the street down the hill, they might equate that years later when he releases the book and says he's hidden something. He could have been seen by people that knew him. So that is a very unlikely scenario. This path would be the more likely. So again, my confirmation bias, I was trying to fit things to the area to make it work. The elevation is too low. The river is too high. The heavy loads and water high, in my mind, was his heavy loads, meaning he had to make 2 trips because it was too heavy for him to carry. He said he had to change the ending when he wasn't when he went into remission of his cancer, and water high, of course, crossing the river. The end of the poem, your efforts will be worth the cold because you're getting cold crossing the water. Anyway, it wasn't there. Let me add a couple things. Oh, he said that he could see pine trees and sagebrush, and there is sagebrush. Like I said, there's different types of pines and that are on here, but also if you see line of sight, where do you find a ton of pine trees is in a cemetery, and you can see this from that island. You can see pine trees around this Paul Stock house. This Paul Stock was a wealthy landowner. I think he even had mayor or something at some point. Anyway, I'm going to show a couple clips here. There's a couple that I did when I was on the island looking, and you can see the kind of dense overgrowth that's out there. And I had to search really hard because it was difficult. I mean, it could have been there if it was just overgrown. I checked every. I mean, I had to look, so I searched it pretty good. And like I say, I eliminate it because the elevation in this river crossing, they would be very challenging for anybody to get there. So I would ask you not to do it. You're welcome to, but for safety reasons, I ask that you don't. Let me show you the videos, though, while I'm here. The final one is from the edge of this hill, and you can see down. You know what? If you do go to Cody, if you happen to be in Cody, and you want to look in this area, no paddle up your creek doesn't mean you can't traverse up this creek. This is a heavily treed area. The problem is that locals, I mean, little kids would want to if I were a kid in this at town, I would have, my friends and I, my brothers, we would have traversed this little ravine and played here all the time. I mean, the chances of a fisherman coming across this. This is a spawning area for brown trout right through here because the high sulfur content water is blended, but by the time it gets here, it's diffused enough, and the city of or let's see, the DNR, the Division of Natural Resources, or who is it? Is it the BLM? Anyway, the fishing division, they study this and they watch the water temperatures and everything. And but they said this little area where the Sulphur Creek comes in is a natural breeding ground for a spawning area for the brown trout. So fishermen are going to be in this whole area. I've seen videos made in this little stretch, which was part of my research. I found some videos that were made. Some locals made some videos walking along this hillside. Uh, if you go to Cody though and you want to search, maybe no paddle up your creek doesn't mean that you don't traverse up here and look. Like I said, this is most of these are private property lots around here, but this is Brown Addition, Brown Subdivision. This was my solve. I can show you one other thing. Um, so you can see these property boundaries. Do you see these lines here? So this is the island in the river there. Well, look at this. Happens to be, with all this private property around it, this area is Bureau of Reclamation land. So that is public land, and so that, as long as it fit the criteria of not being buried or native to the land, I think you would have claim to it if you found it there. Um, can I just say, as I've gone on, I feel like I've rambled. I hope this is interesting. I hope that it's interesting, and I'm not too crazy of a video maker. My content's not crazy. Look at this one, Shoshone or Shoshone. Here's your double omegas upside down in the phonetic spelling. So if you want confirmation bias, it's heavily loaded up in my solve, but it doesn't work. It's not there. Uh, let's see, where did I have my videos? I will start with the ones on the island. You can see how dense this is. I mean, he could have laid down in there and you'd never see him from up on the hill. But there's also hunters that come over here, duck hunters, fishermen. I saw somebody had made a duck blind for hunting. It's on the other side. So, like I said, I was using this little knockoff GoPro type thing, and it was horrible. So it cut off. I didn't stop the video or edit it. That's just what it did. Here's one more. I mean, this is 4K. I mean, this is horrible. Look how poorly that is. Let me try to. I want to try to show you this one thing. Oh, you can see rocks, and you would think that's very shallow. Um, that's the river looking back across, but that's it's deceptive. It's deceptive, and it's only going to get higher as the year goes on. I saw a video, guy fishing here. It had to be the dead of winter, January, at its very lowest, and he could walk through here no problem. But it'll be bad in the summer. A lot of snow this year. So I just look around the base of a tree here. I apologize for how shaky and the video quality, but uh, just to kind of show. Oh, see. Uh, let's see if I can show just a little better the water. So again, boy, that looks so shallow, easy to walk across. But this is, I mean, I'm 6 feet tall, and this is coming up over my. It was up to my thighs at this, and this is even midway. This is midway, so going to the west of here, where I actually crossed, looked like the very best spot. But it gets deep, and the water's strong. I mean, I'm lucky I stayed upright. I don't know what type of a tree this is, but it's kind of a juniper or pine or a. I don't think it's the same one. Oh, maybe it is the same one I had mentioned in the first clip. Okay. So then the next day before we head home, this is up at the cemetery with my GoPro. So here we are in the cemetery. Look at the pine trees. They're not native necessarily, but we do have pine trees here. So there's the island down there in the river. Okay, so again, I mentioned that here's the island out there. If if you're intrigued in any way with this information and you still want to go look for yourself, this is Sulphur Creek that connects. You can see this is 5,000 feet. The island is almost 200 feet lower. Uh, you could look this ravine, and this would be, I guess, I didn't even put that together when I was there. It wasn't until I got home and started thinking about it that up your creek, or no, paddle up the creek, or, that very well could have meant the opposite, that you've now traversed, you switch directions from going down the river to heading up this creek. I you're more likely to have people stumble across it that way. I just I've now that I've gone boots on the ground, have a little bit more level head. I feel like you've got to get away a little bit away from populated areas. And to me, Yellowstone, I mean, they get what, 5 million visitors a year. I don't care where you go. If you don't hike way up in the mountains somewhere there, your chances of a random hiker, going 1 mile off the trail, it's going to happen every day. 5 million people, and that's during their peak season. So it's probably in 4 or 5 months out of the year they get 5 million people. I mean, that place is packed. Anyway, this property here is what shows on the city maps as being Brown subdivision, but it's owned by the cemetery, so there's no homes. Okay, so I make that comment. I forgot that was in there. Um, it seems like in the last 6 questions given this year, he mentions that he's looked several times from our Google Earth or something like that. There's always also a theory that maybe he has some way of being able to see it. Now, to be honest, when you're down there, you cannot see this house. So even if this Paul Stock house, I think there is a connection in some way to the Buffalo Bill Wild, West Museum, but I don't know that they necessarily own it. I know that I looked this up, and but once I was down there, I couldn't even see up over the hill. This where that Paul Stock Trail is down here. Um, anyway, I don't know where there would be any kind of a game camera or anything else. That's why I say that though. Just want to get a shot from here down to the island. This would literally be property home of Brown. Okay, so one last one that's really not going to give anything else. Towards the canyon, Coulter's Hill. So Coulter's Hill would be back over here. This is where the rodeo grounds are, and the river just kind of traverses. You can see a little bit of the outline of it. Comes around here. Um, and again, I realize that I'm trying to give every bit of information of my research in this video, so I know I've rambled. I apologize if it's been comes off as being crazy. I just wanted to give you everything I found. So that is it. This was fun. It was exciting. I really hoped I had something there, but from my rambling, you can tell just how many things I came up with to try to fit my particular choice of location. Um, I'm obviously Forrest, if he had a place in mind. I mean, if that was the location, he would have to look at the geography around and try to give, if he wanted to. I mean, the poem is going to have the clues to get you there. The 9 clues, he says, are in the poem. But if there's hints and he's sharing stories of his life, he's going to share stories because, those were a lot of those stories seemed random and out of place. That's my opinion. But, he would try to choose stories that he might be able to, like the cemetery thing. He might choose a story where he could throw in the cemetery because it fits the geography. And so he could fit little bits of narrative that give a little hint. So you might consider, hey, he would sneak into the cemetery. When the gypsies were in town, he had to go through the cemetery and across a field to their fire. Um, all the headstone of Vietnam. I mean, that was something that stuck out to him to where he to this day remembers what was engraved on it. Not the name, but what was engraved on the headstone. Um, like I said, death is a common theme in his stories. There's just a lot of things. Fishing. Um, it just, to me, this all fit. So again, I was trying to give you every little bit of information that I gathered in this video, and so I hope that there were some things of interest. I hope that maybe gives you some ideas for looking at your location, whatever solve you're working on. I'm going to stop this video and play it back. And if it's not too crazy, I will try to post it on YouTube, and I hope that you find it of interest. Give me some comments and let me know what you think. Thank you.